101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. Bob Pollock is with us this morning, Penn State Extension. Our conversation presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. You have a very smart Penn State shirt on there this morning, so you do.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome.
Do you think my button was off there?
No. Well, I did because there was a hesitation. I should have known. It was just typical you. There's an article on the Penn State Extension website today about the long-term effect of drought on trees and shrubs in particular, and woody plants, and why it is. And I found it really, really interesting because we're not in drought technically, but it's been very, very dry. But they were talking about how trees and shrubs that have wood, they are affected for years down the road when you have an actual drought because of the way they're built, basically. And I found it very, very interesting to talk about. The way that leaves play a role in getting moisture to the tree is pretty fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And of course, those are all perennial or usually long-lived species, most of our woody species, whether they be deciduous or conifer. So deciduous would be our trees and shrubs that lose their leaves every year, and the conifers are going to be our evergreens. And they even still function, because they hold their needles. So they're functioning almost year-round. Not near as much in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. But still, they've got to be able to maintain moisture in those needles. And we could get, even though it is dry out, if you just looked at the statistics, we're 7.5 inches ahead.
I know.
Normal, we've received
That's
40
amazing.
inches of precipitation for the year. So if you just look at that, you'd think, oh, wow, we're in good shape. Mm-hmm. Don't need to water things. Or take a look. But I was digging a hole just the other day to plant a plant and stuck the shovel down there and turning the soil over, and I thought, this is drier than I expected it to be.
Even that.
Yeah. So good to take a look at that. Any plants that you've planted, even last year or the year before. Mm-hmm. Of course, the site and the soil conditions make a big difference in how those plants get established, how consistent the moisture content has been.
Yeah.
So it's good time now to check those. Maybe add a little bit give them a good drink once a week, especially those ones you planted this year, because they might be suffering now. They may not have, because of that. We had a long, hot, dry stretch there. A month or two back. Mm-hmm. And so those plants may not have grown, and those root systems may not have expanded as much as we might think they would, since we can't see them and how they're going and growing, and may not have expanded out into that existing soil that was there before we planted them. So it's good to check those. Stick a little spade down in the soil. Mm-hmm. Even if you have them mulched, that ground could be dry under the mulch now.
Yeah. This article talked about, and you can help me with the word, stomates or stomates?
Yeah, stomates.
Stomates, okay. Stomates in the leaves, and how when there is a drought, the tree is going to react by closing those stomates off, so that even when it does rain and they get water on that leaf canopy, the water is going to go through them slower because they've already closed them down. The tree's closed it down in order to protect itself. And so that's why really long-term damage, as long as 4 or 5 years, can result from one really bad drought year. And then they used a whole bunch of different very long words to talk about the various diseases that can get a tree, and the increased insect activity as well that can get after a tree or a shrub because of drought.
Right, so that they get stressed, There are organisms that are able to take advantage of that or be able to sense it. Especially insects can sense, something's under stress. There's a lot of bark beetles and borers that are actually the chemical, combinations that are given off by a stressed tree or shrub can actually be attractants
Yeah.
to those pests. And in an otherwise healthy tree, that borer may not be able to, it might be able to feed and try to gain access to the bark to make a hole and then get under the bark. But in a normal tree, the tree may be growing faster than what that insect can attack it. And so it's not doesn't become an issue. But in that stress tree that's maybe quit growing, it's, stopped because of that stress and just trying to preserve itself, then those pests can sometimes get a foothold, start to cause damage, and that can
They mentioned
make it worse.
these particular insects, and they're the words you just used: the wood-boring beetles, such as bronze birch borer, the flat-headed apple tree borer,
Yes.
clear-wing borers, such as the rhododendron borer, the ash lilac borer, dogwood borer. Basically, every tree out there has its own boring type of insect, and I know this is a boring subject. Pine bark beetles also more likely to impact drought-stressed conifers. So all of that is there. And then you add in the damage from mowing equipment and stuff like that.
Weed whackers.
Yeah.
But and that's, I still see that. You can look at the base of the tree and say, and if there's grass growing up to that, if you're using a string trimmer, some of those are pretty powerful, and they can actually, that repeated beating on that bark can damage that bark, the trunk of the tree, and cause stress there that you can't see till later on, 6 months, a year, maybe longer, and you start to see dead branches in a tree, or branches that lose their leaves early, and you might be able to trace that back to just that.
Wow.
So
One of my
that's why we like to have some mulch. We like to have a little space around the base, the root flare of the tree, so that we stay away from that. We don't bang up against it with the push mower either. That repeatedly, hitting that bark can damage it, because while that outer bark is dead cells, and really helps prevent and provide structure and support and keep things out, right underneath that bark is where
that's the tender meat.
where the vascular system is, that water and nutrients flow up and down. So
Well, I have
we can damage that.
a bunch of very, very large maples in the yard. And one of them is particularly stressed. And this last couple of years, the upper branches, you could tell, are in trouble. And I've always wondered if it's got a root structure up at the top of the yard where the roots, in some areas, they stick up, and every once in a while the mower blade will just skin a little bit off of that. Is that type of damage, can that be seen way up in the branches?
Yes,
that
it could.
possible?
Damage to that root system as those, like the tree grows, the parts we can see, the branches, as those expand in diameter and size, so do the roots. And so we have some species tend to be a little bit more shallow rooted and are more likely over time, as that tree grows and those roots grow in diameter, to expose those roots. And skimming those off, yes, that can also cause a disruption in the flow of water and nutrients through that root system.
Is that reversible damage?
It as long as it's minimized, you still have a lot of root. One root like that probably is not going to cause the decline of the tree, but multiple ones around the tree, over time could cause that.
I'm just wondering, looking up
affect that.
at that particular tree and the number of bare branches up at the top, it's very, very noticeable. is that something that the tree is going to heal itself and that'll be able to rebound, or is that starting on a progressive road of decay? That's
Right.
gonna
If there's
cause a big
enough
problem?
decline there, if it's kind of in general over the whole canopy of the tree, then there's starting of a decline there that it may not bounce back from.
Mm-hmm.
If it's still just smaller branches versus some bigger ones, then it might be reversible.
I'll bring you a picture.
As long as we get reduce the stresses that it's under. What's actually causing that to happen? Is it a pest like an insect or disease, or is it our environmental growing conditions over time that has stressed that, maybe killed some of the feeder roots in the system enough so that now we're seeing some dieback in the top.
Yeah. All right. So, all right. I'll bring you a picture and let you look at that
Okay.
tree. Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
It is an interesting discussion today, even though it was boring because we had borers.
Borers involved.
It's Indiana in the Morning. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com.